Thank you for everybody to join us for another Wednesday real estate investment seminar. This is great to have all of you back, and here that's where you can relax and start learning things that I don't want you to learn by mistake, because that's going to be very costly. But here you have opportunity to ask experts of different strategies that you came across, and that would help you with your pursuing your real estate investments. So the goal of this real estate investment webinar is to move you from what we call average investor to a savvy investor. This week I came across someone was talking about how it is easy to be a speculator. Means I call myself investor and then fall into the wrong deal rather than become a savvy investor. For savvy investors, you need to really investigate, learn, and see things, talk to different people, investors, read and go to seminars, and that would take some time for you. So the goal here is to move you from what we call speculators, means you're blown to the right and left by any news that you come across, or your cousin said you have a beautiful house, buy it, and you will buy it without doing your investigation. Move you to the right side, which is a savvy investor, where you need a road map to success. I thought maybe I bring up a bonus for today before I ask Matthew to give us information about and a training about rent to own. So I came across this one, Toronto properties tax rate, the lowest and highest in Ontario. Matthew, this is a test for you. What do you think is the lowest one in Ontario? You cannot even believe it.
I would say Windsor.
Oh, that's the lowest or that's the highest?
Oh, I would say it's the lowest.
Okay, I was thinking about the same thing, but let's get surprised here. So the lowest tax is Toronto, surprisingly.
Very surprising. Wow.
Yeah. Then Markham, Milton, Richmond Hill, and Vaughan. And guess where is the highest? Windsor.
Really?
I couldn't believe it. Windsor is the highest. Thunder Bay, Sault Ste. Marie, North Bay, and Sudbury.
So, I picked the highest as the lowest. Okay.
I know. Maybe one of the reasons here is there is not much return coming to the city to take care of things, so they have to squeeze whatever is in there to get the money as a tax for their services. So that might be one of the reasons. I thought Brampton is one of these numbers, but it's not. And voila, today we invited Matthew to join us again. Last time we had a lot of people enjoy your training, Matthew, and you really learn, use your experience. Today I asked Matthew if he can come, and he said, why don't we share the rent to own idea, which is another strategy in real estate investment. So I leave the seminar to Matthew. I'm going to share the screen and share the screen. Okay, so Matthew, you want to take over?
Okay, so let's see if I can find the takeover. Okay, share screen. Okay, I have it.
Perfect.
Okay, so, do you see the rent to own?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. So today I want to talk a bit about rent to own. I've known rent to own since 1994-95. It's when I first learned it. When I learned it from American instructors, which means it was 90% US and probably 10% Canadian. And I had to work with lawyers, I had to work with realtors, I had to work with mortgage agents who didn't really understand the concept. In fact, even the courts didn't have a case in the court system until probably 2001 or 2002 to test case law against rent to own. Now, rent to own is called rent to own, or it's called lease option, or sometimes people call it option to purchase. But either way, it became popular more in 2004, 2005. And the important thing, what made it more popular is that prices were increasing. And for most of my investing from 92 to 2020, the first half of my investing, properties would appreciate maybe 5% a year. Interest rates on average for me in my time was around 5.5%. Since 2012, we've seen properties going up in some areas 10, 15, 20, 30%. And we've seen interest rates at crazy low rates. So, lease option or option to purchase or rent to own works best when someone perceives the market is going up. And here's why. Somebody's buying a house or they're putting a price on it today, but that today's price is really based on what it's going to be worth in 3 years. And if the market is going up, I feel as though if the house is 100,000 today, I feel comfortable agreeing to buy a future price of, let's say, 130, because I know it's going to go up. Lease option will not work that well when the market is going down, because how do you choose a number right now higher than today when you think the market is collapsing? So I tend to think it works better when there's a perception that the market will go up because the person buying that house is agreeing upon a higher future price. Now, having said that, let's go into it and I'll break it down for you. Lease option or rent to own is really a symbiotic relationship, meaning two different creatures sharing, let's say, one investment. You have an investor who has the money to buy a home, to buy a property, and they have capital sitting around. They have the money to put in a down payment, and that's probably 20% down. And at the same time, they want to invest in something more secure. So they'd rather buy a house, have a mortgage on that property, and their investment money locked on the property itself, which is physical, you can touch and feel, as opposed to somebody who would invest in the stock market. It's not as touchy, it's not as feely. The investor as well, who ends up buying a house to rent out to somebody else, they want to get monthly income. So they want income coming in monthly, and they feel as though if they would just buy a house and rent it, they probably won't get as much cash flow. They feel as though if they buy a house and put it into a rent to own situation, people will pay a little bit more. So now they'll have some cash flow, and I'll get into that. At the end of the 3 years or the 5 years, when they sell the house to the person who is renting to own it, they plan to get a lump sum of money. So again, there's the investor who buys the house, and that could be you, and you put somebody in to rent to own. Your money is secured against the property. It's your mortgage. You're getting some income coming in monthly, which is cash flow. You're going to get a lump sum at the end, which is good for you. But the good news is it's more hands-off and it's more hassle-free. Now, when I say hands-off or hassle-free, in most cases, the person who is renting the house from you, they want that house to go up in value because they've agreed to buy it at a future price that is higher than today's price. So they really have a vested interest in making sure that property is in good condition. And they will not run it down the same way as maybe a tenant who has no concern or no character and does not, not planning to treat your property well. And what's good about this as well is that the tenant pays for most things. And I'll get into that in a moment. The second person is the tenant buyer, the person who is saying, hey, I want to be a tenant now, but I want to put money towards buying this house in the future. Yes, I'm going to buy it at a higher price than today, but I want to get into the home because it's one of my goals to have home ownership. And it's really an opportunity to move into that house today. See, let's pretend that I couldn't buy a property. Maybe I didn't have good credit. So I have to now wait 5 or 6 years to live in a neighborhood that I want to live in. But if I'm doing a rent to own, it's possible to get into that neighborhood today and, of course, enjoy that today, and then later on have home ownership. And I'll go into the details of that as well with you in a moment. And of course, it does something called bridging the gap. Because if I don't have great credit right now, but I still want to live in a good neighborhood, it gives me a chance to live in that neighborhood today because I'm renting to own it, and it gives me 3 or 4 years to repair my credit. So it's a bridge. So just really quickly, there are two people involved. There's the home person who's buying the property, which could be you, and the person who's a tenant buyer who's renting to own, which might be you. And there's actually another aspect of this as well. And I want to share that right now. So a few minutes ago, I just explained to you that there's an investor who has money and credit, and they buy a house. Then they put somebody into the house to rent to own. That's one way of doing things. And I've done this many, many times. But at some point, I didn't have the money and credit to buy as many homes as I wanted to, let's say, rent to own. So then I started becoming this person, the joint venture partner to the investor. I started convincing investors that if you have money and credit, let me do all the work. I'll do almost like a dating system. I'll match you to the tenant buyer. I'll do everything. So in this case, I have the money and the credit. I want to get into the game. This case, I don't have the money and don't have the credit, which means I need to know the knowledge. I have to understand the expertise. I have to understand the wisdom and the skill. So I have to get someone to, let's say, walk me through the process and help me with the paperwork to be the brains of the operation. So I bring no money and credit, but I do find an investor who has money and credit. They buy the house, and then I bring a tenant buyer who wants to rent to own the house. Now, I'm going to share the proceeds with this person here. Okay, so remember, there are two ways of doing it. You're the investor, or you're the person who is facilitating the deal. And this way takes less money, but a hell of a lot more knowledge. This way takes more money. You still require knowledge. Knowledge is important. It's very easy to separate a fool from his money. So you don't want to be that fool. Okay, having said that, why would a tenant buyer want to actually rent to own a property? Well, because they're unable to probably get conventional mortgage. In other words, they may have damaged credit. And who knows why that happened? It may be their fault or no fault of their own. It may be a misunderstanding of how credit works, but their credit is blemished or damaged to a point where their credit score is probably 530, 540, 560, under 680, and it's very hard to get a mortgage, but they want to live in a better place today. And maybe they have great kids and they want their kids to live in a better place, in a better space, safer, closer to better schools. Sometimes you're self-employed, so you're a hard worker. You might even be a self-employed electrician. So, you're a hard worker, but at the same time, because you're self-employed, you're expensing away a lot of your income. And then when it comes to show the bank, hey, here's exactly my, what I've made. Oh, but it doesn't look like a whole lot because you expensed everything away. It might be hard to get financed. You might be in a new job and you don't have 1 or 2 years of experience in that position, and the bank might be hard on you because of it. You might have gone through a consumer proposal where somebody said to you, okay, you can't pay your credit cards, we're going to combine it for you. You'll be in a much better position. You let them combine it for you, and then the bank somehow frowns on you because you took the responsible step for actually trying to solve the problem. The bank seems to be looking at who you were, not who you are. Sometimes they give you a hard time. You may have filed for bankruptcy. Maybe it's a business you had. Maybe you had a wrong partner. Because in life, you sometimes have wrong business partners. Maybe you made some wrong choices, and it's hard to get a mortgage. Maybe it's hard to save money. So maybe you have good credit, but you just can't save money. And a lot of people can't save money. Like my dad is a great guy. I love my dad, but everything he buys too. I call him, my dad's name is Frank. I call him Frankie Buy Two, because he has to buy 2 of everything. And when you add that up, it's a lot of money. Maybe you might be new to the country. And maybe you were an accountant, let's say from Persia or Iran, and you've come here as an accountant. All of a sudden, you can't use your skill set, and now you can't get the property you want, yet guess what? You went through all it took to be that, but now you can't be it here. Sometimes people want to test drive a neighborhood, which means I can buy a house in neighborhood A, but maybe I just want to rent to own it for a number of years, and if I don't like it, I can walk away from it. Yes, I'm going to lose my deposit, and yes, I'm going to lose anything I put above my deposit, but at the same time, if I do like it, at least I have some money in it and I could stay. So some people just want to test drive an area because they're not sure if their kids will like that area. So these are some of the reasons why somebody might want to be a tenant buyer, a rent to own person. And some of the reasons why somebody would want to be an owner and have somebody come in and rent from them would be, it's a bit of a lower risk investment than if you were to put it into, let's say, stocks and bonds. Stocks. I have no issues with the stock market. It's great, but I always find that people who do really well really know the market. They spend a lot of time investing in the market, understanding it. And sometimes we're just too busy to be experts in the market. People want to secure an asset, which means they're going to have a home that they put their money into, and they can touch and feel it, and they can rent it out to somebody else, someone to rent to own. And also they want ownership, because sometimes when you invest in something, you may be a part owner. In this case, they could be a full owner and they have at least something invested, and some people like ownership. Now, some people have available capital, so they can put it into a house. Some people like the hassle-free. Why hassle-free? Well, if you recall when I talked about the JV partner, this portion right here, this portion becomes hassle-free if I'm the person, or you're the person, the expert, who is finding the property and matching it to the actual tenant buyer. Okay, so that's more hassle-free. Okay, and so when I say hands-off, that's also hands-off if they're the investor who's bringing the money to the table. Now, it is more hands-off than rental, because remember, with a rental property, the tenant has not really a vested interest to make sure that property goes up in value. And so therefore, you have to do a lot more work. Things break easier. A passive monthly income, they want to receive a monthly cash flow. They want to receive a lump sum at the end. And then they want to have some ownership, as I mentioned. They want to have an increasing asset. You can buy a car, a regular car goes down in value, but a property goes up in value. And I tend to own what goes up in value, and I tend to rent what goes down in value. But either way, some people want to invest their money, their investment, in something that grows no matter what. Now, yes, the market goes up and it goes down. But I came to Canada in 1972. My parents bought a house for $37,000. And today that house is probably worth about maybe $1 million. The bottom line is the market tanked in, I think, 74. I think it tanked in 89. I think it tanked in about 2001. I think it had a tough time in 2007 for a bit. And the price still went up. So real estate does go up over a period of time. And sometimes people want to invest in something that has a client who has a vested interest. And as I mentioned earlier, the person who's a tenant buyer wants the value to go up. In fact, if the tenant buyer agrees to buy for $150,000, we'll use simple numbers, and it ends up being $170,000, that's a bonus to the actual tenant buyer, because they agreed to buy it for $150 and now it's $170. So they really want to keep that in good condition. And I like that. Okay. Now, what is the process of how this is done? The process of rent to own. Well, and don't forget, you can take two positions. Either you're the person forking out the money to buy the house, or you're the person who's the JV partner bringing the buyer and the tenant buyer together. I think you should learn both. So the first thing I do is when I find a tenant buyer, and how do I find tenant buyers? You can just advertise through Kijiji or different methods, rent to own a property. Keep this in mind. The tenants I'm looking for are not tenants who are completely broke. They're tenants who have a darn good job, or a good job, and they can actually pay their rent. And they have good character. See, when you go to the banks focus a little bit less on character now. They focus more on credit. Okay, they focus on your ability to pay back. They focus on all these other C's. But character is something that I focus on when it comes to finding a good tenant buyer. It's somebody who has a blemished situation, but the character states that they want to come back again. So what I do is when I advertise through word of mouth, sometimes I go to meetup groups, sometimes I might put it on Kijiji, I might put it on YouTube. I have the tenant buyer, when they contact me, they fill out an application. What I need to know is that they're making about $55,000 a year plus household. That means everybody in the house combined. And I expect them to put between 5 and 20% down. So you might say to me, well, if I don't have money to put down, I can't come to you. That's right, you can't. That's my rule. You have to have between 5 and 20%. But it doesn't have to be somebody else's rule. Somebody else might say, all you need is 1% down or 3% down. You'll discover that most people are looking for between 5 and 20% down. For me, on average, If you have 10% to put down on the house you want, then that's a qualification for me. The fact that you have bad credit right now is not a major issue. And the fact that you can make your payments, that's important. So I have you fill an application out. And then I look at the income that you're making. Can your income actually pay for the type of house you want? Some people come to me and say, hey, I want a $2 million house. No, your income doesn't match that. It may match a $450,000 house. So if that's what it matches, that's what I'm going to help you get. So I'm going to put you in to whatever you can pay for, your household can pay for. Because I do not want to buy a house, put you into a rent-to-own scenario, and then all of a sudden you fail, and then lose your deposit and lose your money. I want you to win. And if I'm the JV partner who brings the person who has the house and brings you together, I want to see success. I want both to win. So what I tend to do is I make sure I understand what you can monthly pay. I make sure that I have a mortgage agent take a look at you, because 3 years from now or 5 years from now, you're going to own a home. And I need for them to look at to see where you are right now in order to help you put a plan together to get you where you want to be in 3 years or 5 years. So we have to see where you are now. This mortgage agent is not going to qualify you because right now you're not getting a mortgage, but they do have to qualify your situation to see where you're at. And of course, I would like you to provide between 5 and 20% down. 10% is average. But here's what I do. I tell you, go find a house. Go find a house that you like within your means and one that's for sale. So I don't get a house. I just tell you, go find one. And if it's for sale, I'll buy it. Or my investor will buy it and put you in as a rent to own. So therefore, the tenant finds a house for sale. Now, we can help you negotiate that house to get a better deal. So again, either I have a home, which I don't right now for you, but if you want that property and you find a great one, go get it, find it, bring it to me, I'll negotiate, I'll buy it, or my investor will buy it. And then of course, we're going to negotiate it. It's going to have an inspection. That's going to cost some money. And we have to have an appraisal so we can determine a starting value, because we have to determine what the value is today, and we have to figure out what the value is going to be in the future. Because you're going to agree to pay a future price that's higher. I want to make sure you're confident that you have a good starting point. That's why I'm going to appraise it, to make it fair for everybody. Then I'm going to buy the house, or my investor is going to buy the house. And we're going to put you into a rental lease agreement where you're going to rent that property for the next 3 years. We're also going to put you into what's called a long form purchase and sale agreement. See, a purchase and sale agreement is when you're buying a house, and generally it closes in 3 months. A long form is the same type of agreement, but it closes in 3 years. So technically you're leasing, but you have the right to buy that house. We agree upon the future price, which is a guess. We guess the future based on what has happened in the past and what is happening in the area. And we come up with a price that is fair, and to you and to me, or to my investor and to you. And ultimately, we put you into that agreement. So now you're paying your lease agreement, and you have an agreement to say that you're going to own that property in 3 years. Or we can use something called an option to purchase, which is a different agreement. I don't have time to talk about that today, but just Google that when you have a chance. So now the tenant moves in. That's the beauty of it. You don't have to wait 3 years to buy a house till your credit is good. You can move in today. And of course, you pay your rent portion, which covers the mortgage, covers the taxes, covers the insurance, so that the property owner, that's being covered. You're going to take care of a few other things as well. You're going to take care of all your utilities. You're going to take care of minor repairs under $500. And ultimately, you're going to pay not just rent, but you're going to pay a portion above the rent that goes towards your savings. I'm going to show you the math on that in a moment. And some of that savings, that will go towards the house in the future. I'm going to help you save. And of course, you do take care of your basic amounts. And what we're hoping is that the tenant, that the owner gets some cash flow from that. And of course, the next step is after three years, people say, should it be 3 years? Should it be 5 years? It all depends on how bad your credit is. It could take 3 years to repair your credit. And sometimes it could take 5 years. But what we tend to do with you is we try to help you improve your credit over the next 3 years. And we do that through coaching, and we do that through mindset. And why do we do that? Because we want you to buy the house. We don't want you after 3 years to not be able to buy it and lose your deposit and lose any money you've put towards it. Now, when I say we, I'm just saying this is the mindset of the person who is renting to own, who gives you the chance to rent to own a property. Now, if you're the investor, you're the one who's helping the person who's renting to own to make sure that you help them with their credit. If they had a problem in the past, they may have a problem in the future. And if they can't buy, at least you give them a shot. And of course, the property might improve and the tenant tends to buy the house at the end. So that is the 6-stage process of buying the property. We give an application, or if you're the investor, you give them an application. You check out what they can afford. Number 2, they go find that house for you. You buy the property, put them into agreement. They rent to own it from you, and then they take the house over and the house is sold. If they cannot complete the lease, they leave the house is still yours, but you obviously want them to complete the lease. Now, what is the process for the investor? Well, if I'm the investor, I have to know myself. But if I'm the JV guy who's bringing an investor to the table, then I have to know my investor. I have to understand how much capital does he or she have? How much capital does he or she have to invest in a property? And can they qualify to buy that property? Because again, as a JV guy, I need to know what you can buy. And if you can buy a $700,000 home, you have the down payment for that, 20%, and qualify for the mortgage, that's good to go. But how much cash flow do you need? I have to make sure that that house can actually produce enough cash flow in order to satisfy why you're investing to begin with. And sometimes, even if you have a house that's rent to own, I sometimes have the person renting to own on the main floor, and we may have to put a tenant who is just a tenant in the basement. Because the combination of the rent to own, the rent plus the portion above the rent, and the combination of the tenant paying in the basement, who technically will move out 3 years from now, or become the tenant of the tenant buyer, the two together may help cover what the investor needs to make. And sometimes just one house alone will cover it. All depends on the rents. But I need to know what kind of cash flow they need. I need to know what they need at the end of this deal in order to actually facilitate what they want to do. And then I have to remember something. I have to make some money too if I'm bringing the investor. So how am I going to make money here? I may make a little bit of the cash flow. I may make a small amount of the lump sum at the end. And perhaps I might make 30% of that. Now, 30% of the lump sum could be $30,000, $40,000. Yes, I'm going to wait 3 years for 30 or 40,000. But if I did this 10 times instead of just one time, now that's a much bigger payday. It's a $300,000 payday that shows up in about 3 years. And perhaps I need to put my daughter through university at that time. So it all depends on your situation. Of course, now you want to match the investor to the tenant buyer. And of course, we have to figure out what type of house the investor feels comfortable, what area, what price tag, what condition of the house they're looking for. And the tenant buyer, what's their score right now? What's their income? What's their character? Can they actually succeed in the next 3 years? Next, I want to bring them together. So once I bring them together, I may have a realtor find that property for the tenant buyer. I may have a mortgage agent look at them today and be the person to give them that mortgage in the future. But here's the good news. The mortgage agent on my team can get the deal right now when the investor is buying the property, and they can also, get the mortgage for the tenant buyer in the future. So there's a vested interest for them to help that tenant buyer to be able to qualify in the future. And of course, insurance and legal is required. All paperwork has to be taken care of. And then, of course, over the next 3 years, you're going to have to figure out who's managing it. Now, if there's no JV and you're the person who bought the house and you're renting it out to somebody else, then you're taking care of whatever problems that pop up. If you're the JV person, the investor takes care of nothing, you take care of everything. The tenant buyer is going to treat the property much better, of course, than normal. Okay, so that's the mix, 1 to 4 of the process for the investor. And don't forget, you can ask questions as soon as I'm finished. Now, let me go through some of the math for you, right? and now keep in mind that this is going to be broken down very, very simple. Okay, and I'm leaving some things off because I'm just trying to teach you the concept, not go into all the intricate details of, closing costs and land transfer tax and title insurance and all that kind of stuff. I'll leave a lot of stuff out for now. I'm going to use a simple number because math is hard to teach at a distance. So let's say for the investor, the current price of a house is $250. So the tenant buyer went out and they found the house worth $250. I know it's a little number, but again, for teaching purposes. Now, they have to give what I call the initial option consideration, which is really the initial down payment. In this case, it's not 5%. They didn't bring 20. They said they had 10%. Okay, so the tenant buyer, this person here, provides 25% upfront in order for the investor to use that down payment along with their money in order to buy this property. Because the investor is buying it 20% down. And this is 10%. Okay, so again, the initial option consideration, the initial down payment is $25K. This is gonna pretty much help buy the property, but this $25,000 will be given back to the tenant buyer when they're buying their house in the future, when they're buying this house in the future. Okay, so there's $25,000 in the pot for them. Now, they have to make monthly payments, which we call monthly payment consideration. So when it comes to the rent they're paying, it's really called an occupancy fee. So it's like rent, but we use the word occupancy fee, which gives us, I think, a little bit more protection. And we call this an option consideration. We don't call it rent. We try to do everything we can do to try to not be right into the Landlord-Tenant Act. And whether you're in it or not, at least we're using the right words. And to use some famous words, it is what it is, right? But either way, so the base option consideration, in this case, let's say it's $1,400, which is like rent. But then they have to give us an additional option consideration, which is an equity builder. It builds equity for them, which is $450. This person is paying $1,850. So the person who is renting to own from you cannot be broke. This is not, I have very little money. I can't afford a house at all. So therefore I want to rent to own it. This is not layaway, where you want to buy a pair of jeans. You can't afford a pair of jeans. So you put a little bit of money towards the pair of jeans. But that pair of jeans in layaway stays actually in the store. This is a house you get to live in. This is not layaway. This is, you have the money to buy the house, at least make the payments, but you don't have the ability to qualify for the mortgage, and you don't have as much down payment money as maybe you need. Okay, so that's a different situation. So you're paying $1,850. Now, sometimes there's a condo fee. It all depends on where you're at. So you'd have to pay the condo fee as well. And the condo fees can increase as time goes on. And that the contract will state that if the condo fees increase, you'll have to pay some more. And then, of course, you might need some credit counseling. And maybe you might get charged for that if you want some credit counseling to help you with your credit. I've kept them at zero anyway, because these two options, let's say, don't apply to this scenario. But so far, you've put $25,000 down, 10% of the house you're going to buy, and you chose that house. You're going to pay $1,400 a month, which technically looks like rent, which we call occupancy fee. You're going to pay $450 a month, which is the consideration that goes towards your equity, because you'll get it back. That's $1,850. Now, to carry this house, the owner is going to have to pay probably $1,000 because they have to pay a mortgage of $860. Why is it so small? Because $250 is a small amount. And property taxes are probably $3,600, so therefore it's $40 a month. Insurance is probably $100 a month. So therefore, when you add these three up, just to keep it simple, it's about $1,000 they're putting out. So therefore, when $1,850 comes in, $1,000 takes care of all the expenses. Keep in mind that this $1,850 does not include utilities, which is heat, hydro. Perhaps the water has to be added to this as well, but does not include heat, hydro, cable, internet, or anything like that, or minor maintenance. So $1,850 comes in, $1,000 goes out, and then there's $400 that technically, $450, that technically goes into a pot to go towards your down payment. So when you go $1,850 minus $1,000 minus $450, the cash flow is $400. Now, let's be frank about this. If you're buying the house in 3 years from now, this 25% you put down, I'm getting it today, not 3 years from now. And this 450 you put into my pocket every single month that goes towards when you buy the house in 3 years, I'm getting it today, not in 3 years from now. So one of the advantages of rent to own is you get a piece of the down payment money right up front for the house you're selling 3 years from now to the tenant buyer, and you're getting that $300-$400 a month, in this case $450 every single month, that goes towards that sale. Now, so therefore your cash flow of $400 is really cash flow, and the $450 you're getting it as well. It goes towards the sale of the house. Now, let's go take a look at the actual tenant buyer. Again, I'm trying to keep this simple. So the house is bought for $250. Let's say it appreciates 5% a year. So on the first day, we agreed to sell it for $290. Now people say, well, why would somebody pay more money in the future when they can't predict the future? Well, it's because they want that convenience today. They want to be able to live where they want to live today. That's why people lease very expensive cars. That's why people do things that they do. That's why credit cards work so well. People want something today for what they can't pay for today, but they want to enjoy it today. So it's pretty simple when somebody knows where they want to be, but they can't afford it, for them to agree to pay $290. And of course, we want this to be a reasonable price, not crazy. So let's say 5%. And we know some areas have been appreciating 10% a year. You have to figure out what is fair. 3 years from now, here's what's going to happen. You got to remember at the end of this term, the 3-year term they're about to buy, what down payment have they collected? Well, the starting down payment, which is this right here, and the equity builder, which is the 450, the equity builder. So if I go 25,000 plus 16,200, now where's that from? Well, it's 450 a month times 12 months times 3 years. Added together, they've amassed about $41,000 worth of down payment money to go towards a $298,000 home. Now, if they go through CMHC and do 5 or 10% down, that's more than enough to take care of their down payment. So at the end of the term, what do they owe? Well, they're buying something for $290. They've already paid $41,200. So they only owe $248,800, and that will be the mortgage they're going to qualify for whatever portion of that, based on how much they're getting loan to value ratio. Okay. Now, how does the investor make money? Well, just to keep it simple now, the final sale is $290, which is here. They bought it for $250, which is here. Now, yes, there's expenses I did not include. I don't want to do that right now. So the profit is $40K. 290 minus 250 is $40K. Now, they've also collected the $14,400 throughout the last 3 years. So therefore, together, the $40K and the $1440, technically, they should be making about $54,000 using these numbers. So initially, they've put some money down to buy this property. In most cases, they've put half of this, so probably $25,000. And all these years later, they're going to make about $54,000. And again, I've just kept this very, very simple. Now, can it be more complex? Yes, it can. Here's an example of something more complex. I'm not going to go into this in detail. I'm just going to say to you, this is more complex, which means, and by the way, this comes from who I consider some of the industry leaders in rent to own. It's a company called JAG, Alfonso and Adam. I'm not a part of their company, but I don't have a problem identifying great people who do great things. So I want to give a shout out to these guys, and how they do their business, I think, is incredible. So do I do rent to owns? Yeah, sure I do. Do I know about it? Yes, I do. Have I been doing it since 1995? Yes, I have. But I've been building houses and building buildings and doing a lot of other things as well. These guys have been focusing just on this for the last 10 years. So there's always different sources that you can go to find out how to do what I'm talking about. But just to give you an example of things to consider, you might have the investor cash required. Let's say in this case, $64,000. The term is 36 months. They say the ROI will be 37%. The monthly cash flow will be $740, and total profit at the end of the whole thing would be about $71,000. Now, keep in mind that that's pretty much what they're projecting. $380,000 is the purchase. It's 80% mortgage, so they throw some numbers in there. 20% down, they throw some numbers in there. But now this is the part where I didn't talk about before. When you're buying a property, you have to consider land transfer tax, any kind of legal fees, your home inspections and appraisals. That could be $500 to $1,500. You have to maybe pay a finder's fee for this property, who knows? And then of course, there's some considerations that we have the option consideration. So keeping all that in mind, we also have to now consider the buyout when the person's actually buying the property. And when the person's buying the property, you have to consider what's the mortgage at the time, what's the inspection at the time, what's the initial investment the person actually gave you, what is the deposit, what rents have been credited back to them, what's the closing costs, as well as your lease payments. How did you make money in the leases? So again, I'm not going to go into this. This is on the screen for you, and I can always email this to Ashton so he can send this to you. But ultimately, I'm just showing you here that there's a few more numbers you have to consider. Okay, so that's pretty much what I wanted to mention about to rent to own. But don't forget, going back to the top here, you have to decide who you want to be. Are you going to be somebody who's a customer renting from somebody else to own? Are you going to be an investor who brings the money and the credit to the table and somebody rents to own from you, which is good because you're getting a down payment up front. You're getting some down payment money monthly for the next number of years. Someone's taking better care of your property. And of course, you don't have to cover anything. Or you may want to be the JV partner who brings the two together. And now you can get involved in it if you have the expert knowledge. Okay, so those are the two scenarios that I would consider that you might want to look into. So that ends my little chat. Hopefully that makes a lot of sense.
Yes, excellent. Thank you very much.